The first time the loss of bird populations in the U.S. created a large movement for conservation in response to the threat of an industry was in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Then millions of birds, especially those in the heron and egret family, were hunted and sold to be made into hats for wealthy women, as was the fashion at the time. The unregulated slaughter of these birds, especially in the Everglades region of Florida, led to the creation of groups such as the Audubon Society, founded in 1886, and many others that lobbied for legislation at the local and national levels to restrict the killing and trade of wild birds in the U.S. The movement was largely successful in changing the destructive practices in the nation throughout legislation, enforcement, and changing the collective opinion of society by making information about the issue clear and widespread. In 1962, former U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service employee Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, which presented a future where DDT and other pesticides then in widespread use have caused irreparable damage to the environment, to many animals, including birds, and to human health. Many say that Silent Spring began the modern environmental movement that continued through the 20th century and now into the 21st. Through EPA issued a cancellation for DDT in 1972. Many of the problems that Carson wrote about throughout the ecological career still exist in industrial agriculture today. 1970 was the first day when 1 in 10 Americans took to the streets to protest the abuse of the environment by corruptions in governments. They also marched in celebration of the first Earth Day, a phenomenon that is still alive half a century later. That year, 1970, is also the beginning of the study that inspired our project. Since that fateful year, the amount of individual birds in North America has decreased by more than 2.9 billion. While some populations, such as raptors, experience growth, most species have suffered from the continued exploitation of the natural world, creating a trend that is not irreversible for now. Climate change, habitat loss, human expansion, and several other factors have contributed to cause a dramatic drop in this important indicator. We can change this startling statistic, but we need to act now. Illinois has historically been an area where birds can thrive, but recently our bird population has fallen markedly. Between the 1950s and now, our bird population has suffered the most. Illinois water supplies are being contaminated, and the use of pesticides has grown in farming areas. In the past 10 years, 1.4 million birds have been lost each year. In Chicago, we've torn down bird habitats and built large structures in their place, which block migration paths and pose hazards to flying birds, which can crash into buildings and break their necks. There has been a 53% reduction in grassland birds because of this habitat loss since the 1800s, when farmers started to destroy habitats for farming. Statistics like these come from organizations such as the Illinois Natural History Survey, which has compiled 40 years' worth of data from birdwatchers. This is why it is important to birdwatch. This is why it is important to birdwatch and report which birds you see on websites like eBird. Other organizations that work to help birds are the Illinois Ornithological Society and the Illinois Audubon Society. They recruit volunteers and assign them to different counties where they bird watch and collect data. There has been a lot of work by many dedicated people to help avian populations, from large organizations to individual citizens taking everyday actions and teaching other people about the issue. Scientists remain hopeful about the future, but if we all make the right choices, birds can thrive again in Chicago and around the world.